Michael, with your cue, I'm prepared to start. Are we allowing people a few minutes to settle in? How would you like to go about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. My name is Michael Corselli. I'm the chairman and founder of Flya. I found a very, very interesting company that is expressing a major change that's happening in the world today, and one that's inevitable. Electrum is one of a kind electric vehicle charging solutions company. It's a pre-public opportunity to participate in a high-growth reverse takeover. They have already operating business. They have a charging solution. They're going to get into all the details of what they have built, their targets, and how they're going to roll out this next generation of electric vehicle charging solutions. So each member of this team is successful. They have a successful track record. They've been around. I'm not trying to date them, but well over 20 years of experience. However, Electrum was founded in May of 2015, and it looks to position itself as a global solution for electric vehicle charging. So today, this gentleman that's with me is Frank Salvati. He's the Chief Financial Officer, and Dan Trudell, who's the founder and CEO. So Dan was hired by Leviton in 2008, a large US-based electrical device manufacturer, to formulate and lead an initial EV charging program for commercial and residential sectors. It was suggested that the program would show modest results over 6 months and even perhaps dissipate. But as a motor car enthusiast with the keen sense of mechanization, and he's also an electrician, he wasn't so sure of that. He actually believed in it. Turns out his instincts proved to be correct. So Dan brought Frank on board with Electrum. Frank is the CFO. I'm going to turn it over to him to share, with you what he's been doing over the past 40 years of business experience in both the public and private market sectors, in mining, agriculture, media, education, and electrification with regards to EV. So with that said, I would like to turn this over to Frank to begin.
Terrific. Michael Corselli, chairman of Flya, we thank you very much. It's platforms like this that enable us and allow us to reach out to a greater and more learned audience. So we do thank you for the platform, and I propose to commence with some macro level statistics at the higher level, of course, and then come down to the micro level, reiterate a little bit of Dan's background and why it's relevant to the space and in the space, and particularly the electrical background. I myself have a background in the electrical utility space, but that's more from a financing perspective as opposed to on or in the field. So what we've watched is the EV market rapidly expanding, and sales have grown at a rate of approximately 50% since 2010. The transport sector, the second largest contributor to greenhouse emissions in Canada, influence a focus on more accessible, greener solutions. The attachment rate in Canada is approximately 6.7%, indicating a greater need for charging infrastructure to satisfy growing demand. Globally, we see it at approximately 6% about a year ago, but I believe we're going to go beyond the projections, which I'll get into for 2025 at 30%. So many of the economic benefits of deploying EV charging infrastructures at highly frequented locations with short-term visits such as workplaces and retail is what we believe will be prevalent. We believe it'll be a destination-oriented charging, contrary to or in contrast to the fossil fuel method of powering up, which is one that you actually go to as opposed to you arrive at beginning or end of your day. And as I mentioned, by 2025, EV sales are projected to account for approximately 30% of vehicle sales globally, and we are already ahead of that pace, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And federally, we're seeing in place countries like Norway, certainly Canada, and certainly the current federal initiatives in the United States would feed to a greater acceleration to what we're already seeing, which is ahead of that pace. The statistic of a year ago, EV infrastructure market is projected to reach 113 billion by 2027. From a micro perspective, we are pleased the company that is, of course, to be led by Dan Trudeau, who was hired by Leviton in 2008, a large US-based electrical manufacturer, to formulate and lead an initial EV program. Through 6 years at Leviton, he was focused on the EV charging space and developed a unique perspective of the market and understanding of the need for managed services would be required for this technology's evolution. And that's the quintessential point that Electrum strives to focus on, which is essentially what we call a solutions-based approach, starting with the pre-feasibility, feasibility, installation. We do installations really as a customer acquisition process. Even though it is profitable for us, our real opportunity lies in the network, which is, we say, post-plug or beyond the plug. The infrastructure component presented a strategic opportunity alongside the software which controls it. Again, our focus to maintain a reliable level of service, quality control, post-installation for customers. Dan's vision focuses on the evolution of charging solutions and how do we efficiently and effectively manage energy as more and more EVs plug in. In 2015, Dan set out on his own and founded Electrum with a mission to contribute towards a carbon neutral planet by providing solutions that close the gap between EV charging, grid management, user experience, cost recovery, and profitability objectives. I joined Dan approximately 2 years ago. My background, this being my 40th year in business, 35 years in the professional and public realm, 10 years in public practice as an auditor, income taxation specialist, and ultimately a forensic accountant, which led me to many advents of due diligence, which brought me into the public markets, where I've been for approximately 25 years, including the big board. As I mentioned earlier, I also have a background in hydro and utilities and heavy industry in the way of mining. I possess 5 international licenses, a CPA in the US, 1 in Canada, a forensic license in the US, and 2 international designations. With that, I bring to bear, to Electrum's platform and solution. We start off with the how we define ourselves. An electric vehicle charging solutions company providing end-to-end electrical infrastructure to corporations, governments, utilities, developers, OEM manufacturers, and residential users. The company has deployed electric charging infrastructure for some of the largest EV developers and hardware manufacturers and automobile manufacturers in the world. Electrum is targeting a $5 million revenue for the 12 months ended this fiscal December 31st, 2022, through 3 channels primarily: the installation and maintenance, planning, installing, and maintaining the mobility infrastructure. As we mentioned, for us, that's a customer acquisition tool. The network technology, our prime focus, we use customer-centric proprietary software, networking, and dashboard. So the accumulation of customers, whether they are ours from the installation phase or others, as long as they're open source, we back them onto our network as well. We see that as our opportunity to expand globally through IP versus hardware and hardware deployment. Hardware and hardware deployment, as we see technology rapidly evolves that. And from our perspective, we are sooner and more adept from the learnings of our customer installations to capitalize on IP and global expansion through virtuality than we do in hardware footprints. And then ultimately, our environmental management platform, which includes, of course, carbon offsets, we enable clients to integrate, plan, achieve ESG targets with electrified transportation and data support. The company has a near-term pipeline of 10 million for the next year ending December 31st, 2023. We are raising 8 million at a pre-money valuation of 32 million, representing a 20% equity stake in the company, with closing set for mid next month. And I'll walk you through our milestones. Through 2017, we started off as a premier installer of Tesla chargers in the province of British Columbia, and seek now to expand to Ontario and New York State, and then ultimately Washington State and California. In 2018, we developed our network and we patented it, and we developed partnerships with Porsche, Siemens, Nemetz, ABB, and Faihong. We deploy agnostically some 15 of the top chargers available in the world. From there, we had a milestone of 2,000 implementations in 2019, primarily, which are more lucrative, but also are more learned clients. We have hospitals such as the Fraser Health System, Richmond Hospital, St. Paul's, Vancouver, and Langley hospitals. In 2020, we started with MERBs, multiple unit residential buildings, where we found it to be as lucrative as dealing with the hospitals. And then ultimately our target is fleet for municipalities. We have 4 municipalities as customers. So our developer repertoire are Concord, Aragon, Kutak, Red M, Shape, and Landmark Properties. These are some of the larger developers in Western Canada. And from there, we segue to the municipalities by reputation. Surrey, Vancouver, North Vancouver, and Burnaby. Surrey is probably next to Norway, the most advanced area in the world for EV adoption, and in our case, solutions evolvement. And from our fleet perspective, in Q1 2022, we worked with Green Power, a bus service, and now Peterbilt. You might know the big heavy trucks similar to Mack trucks. They are one of our clients, and we are deploying charging networks for them, a little more complex, but it's working quite well for us now. Harbor Air, which is a flotation type of vehicle, and Helijet. And from there, we worked through to Q2 2022 and launched our network capabilities for generating carbon credits, but more so accounting for them and aggregating them. And ultimately, which is in our lab, which we'll be deploying probably Q4 of this year, is our power sharing footprint. And from there, we do a grid curtailment management, and that's our R&D, which is like your tap and go and your QR code. One of the laments globally is that a number of the chargers are, well, dare I say, dumb. They're not smart chargers, and often they don't work, and the deployers aren't aware that they're not working, as they do not have a virtual real-time assessment or diagnostics of it. In our case, that's not the case, as we're able to do that and ensure they're always developed and operating. Another lament is that it can take about 90 seconds to about 2 minutes to onboard, and each charging system requires an onboarding. We don't see that at the fossil fuel stations. We shouldn't see it here. In our lab, we've developed commercially the QR code method of tap and go, and ultimately we'll go with a tap and go via your phone and or cards of sorts. So from our perspective, our growth from 2020 through 2023, we've seen a CAGR of 103%, starting from about 1.2 million in 2020 through 10 million in 2023 projected. And those are our highlights in our teaser. And from there, I'll move over to our deck, and I'll just select a few of the slides and present what I think might be relevant to the understanding of deploying what we call solutions. We focus on an open source technology. We are customer centric, and we provide a dashboard with 24-hour support, billing, power sharing, grid integration, environmental planning, and emission offset capabilities. It's all customer driven, whether it's on the export or input. We have a cost recovery model where we offer numerous cost recovery options through billing, energy management, carbon offsets, and grid curtailment. We've seen the diversity of our customers, be it MERBs of such as condominium buildings, high-rise rental, or hospitals. We've seen the differentiators there. By way of example, what we did in one of the hospital configurations is we reverse engineered their RFID system and used it, as they had an existing infrastructure, to light up, if you will, and make smart the charging system we installed for them. So they had to do nothing in the way of changing their infrastructure. They were and are open source. We were able to integrate right into it and activate a charging system to integrate to their full accounting and alert systems. As I had mentioned, we are hardware agnostic, and we're focused on the open source methodology, working with credible EV and OEM manufacturers, and they include Siemens, Webasto, Delta, Feihong, and Lite-On, among others that we've already mentioned. Our mantra to our customers is that we empower our customers by providing solutions that allow for the adoption of electrified platforms while advancing climate solutions and new technologies for the intelligent management of electricity from generation to user. And that's the key, the electricity management from generation to user, both cost and utility. We have a core team of 7 individuals. Dan, of course, our founder and visionary. Myself, I handle the capital markets and governance. As I mentioned, I'm a licensed forensic accountant. We have David Bimji, who handles the software solutions around the Internet of Energy, or the Internet of Things, and we have segued from there to the Internet of Energy. We have Eugene Soyo, our software and hardware technology industrial design master, we call him. His specialty came in the 3D printing area, both hardware and software, which adapts and cross-ports quite seamlessly to the EV charging systems. And hence we brought he and his colleague in, Chris Lee, who's a public market CFO and multi-designated internationally, the Asias, the UK, and North America. And our lead software developer and programmer is Justin Tsai. He worked with the higher levels with the programmers in the Apple world. Our solution cycle starts with a planning and design phase. We plan and design vehicle charging infrastructure, meters charging technologies nationally with certified EVITP, what we call Red Seal electricians on staff. We have a dozen of them that are also trained to integrate virtually. So they bring with them their skills as Red Seal electricians, and we've trained them to now do installations, but more so onboarding onto the network. Our second element in our solution cycle is EV installation. We install and service EV chargers, meters, and charging technologies nationally with certified EVITP Red Seal electricians on staff. Our next phase in the network solution cycle, we onboard. We manage supply units, meters, network administration, develop and manage cost models, and site management strategies for large-scale deployments. And then ultimately, energy management, and this is what we're commercializing as we speak. Electrum's open source software intelligently manages charger access, billing, load, and electrical components to reduce utility bills. Accurate metering of energy can be used to generate carbon credits as a revenue source. So different than in other methods of capturing and measuring, recording and measuring carbon offsets, a unit of electricity is a very specific node, and we're able to capture that and translate that into a carbon offset. And what we do for the smaller customers, where it's impractical for them to do the capturing, we aggregate among pools of smaller customers, and we aggregate and create carbon offset pools. So to reiterate, our turnkey end-to-end solution starts with the planning and design, through installation, through energy management, and then repetitively access and billing, monitoring, maintenance, access and billing, monitoring, maintenance, as we go through that SaaS component, the tail end of the turnkey solution. As mentioned, our primary focus are MERBs, workplace, fleet, institutional, and public applications. We work with a primary focus on being compatible with OEM EV manufacturers. We also do touchless technology functionality. We have one of the installations, for those of you that have had opportunity to go to the deck, you'll see one of the slides where there's a bus being charged from an overhead charger that is also touchless. And then we also do customized options and branded solutions. We can take the chargers where the manufacturers will allow us to and reskin it to brand it to customer specific or use specific, such as a hospital or designated areas within a hospital or residential, various tiers, and so on. In that space, we've dealt with Mercedes, GM, Ford, Hyundai, Nissan, and most recently Audi. We primarily focus on level 2 charging, although we've seen an influx and need, and it's become more so a blend with fast chargers. So where we were deploying some 80 to 90% level 2 chargers, that is more of a mix now of about 2/3, 1/3 level 2 to fast charger. For those looking for more technical specifications, a level 2 charger will charge between 2 to 3 hours for a full recharge. A level 3 DCFC or fast charger will charge within 15 to 20 minutes. So you see a vast differential there, and sometimes the blend is what customers prefer. And in the deck, for those that were able to access it and have a look, you'll see some of our design specifications, which we employ in our pre-feasibility. What we have found often is that a customer might order something under the impression or belief that that is what they need, when in essence, without a feasibility or pre-feasibility, we've seen installations where we've had to go in and retrofit or outright remove and reinstall, whereby they didn't get what they needed. They got what they were asking for, not necessarily what they wanted. So we've seen some of the larger installers, in fact, globally, are using regional installers or even local installers, so they don't have direct access or interaction with the customer, and therefore at times have had some technically flawed installations. We've come in and remedied them for some of the larger installation bases, some of Siemens clients, a major airport and the like. And we also have an EV/IV dashboard, and this is what the customer sees. And we provide management and operations infrastructure for strata or landlords to be able to go in and see how best to manage their power. The cost of incrementally adding power capacity is prohibitively expensive versus tethering or managing and measuring and having charging done at low peak, whereby you can prevent the requirement for on-demand power and also strategically plan into the future, whereby it's more practical and more cost-effective. And oftentimes a generator, even a smaller one, will take about 6 to 8 months from when it is ordered. Obviously can't, with that sort of a deployment strategy, one wouldn't be able to keep up with demand, particularly in British Columbia, where we do most of our business, the installation business. The lead time is anywhere between 8 to 12 months. And the EV/IV network provides a comprehensive solution for infrastructure operations and sustainability planning. The network allows for infrastructure operations, power sharing to limit hardware and utility costs. And that's a key point about expanding power requirements methodically and in a planned process versus on demand, where again, it gets prohibitively expensive. We do direct billing. I mentioned the tap, the fob, and the card, all methods of tap and go. Then, of course, the sustainability planning and carbon offsets, the admin dashboard, charger access control, intelligent load management, another one of our key components, and time of use reporting that allows for additional planning and presents opportunities for efficient, effective usage of the in situ electricity. And that walks us through our deck in a succinct manner. And I'd like to now move over to the use of funds from our prospective raise. Our raise is 6 million, of which approximately $1 million will be going into cost pre-market development. And we have a definitive agreement to reverse takeover RTO into a target, or we actually are the target, into a listed, compliant, and otherwise trading shell is voluntarily halted to conclude our transaction. That it has been trading, it's a much shorter timeline from when we get approval to close to when we trade. It could be a 3 to 5 day process versus up to 60 days. We're putting another $1 million into our software development. That's our version 2 that is coming out this September, and we're putting additional enhancements, most of them for efficiency use. In other words, shortening the time and increasing the intelligence of power regeneration. We're putting $1 million into expansion. That'll be primarily in Toronto and Western New York as our starting points. And the additional balance of about 3 million is for general working capital. It will qualify us for some of the listing requirements and allow for the increased sales to finance the turn of receivables. From a comparative analysis, and these numbers are from December 2021, we took the top 8 companies that were listed, that's where we have visibility, and did an analysis on all of them, and wound up with an assessment of a 40 times sales value. So what we did is took a number of decrements in that we're not listed and do not have a $100 million war chest. We went backward from there and came down to a 13 times multiple. And then from there, we took a further decrement of 3 times, accounting for any market volatility. And sure enough, here we are in that. So we assessed ourselves as from a valuation perspective at 10 times sales, which meets our pre-money valuation of 32 million. All right. At this point, I'd like to ask if there are any questions that might be posed from the floor, or Michael, anyone from your group that might have some questions on behalf of the audience.
Absolutely. So for those of you that don't know, there's a Q&A function inside the Zoom toolbar. If you click on it and enter your question, I will convey the actual question to Frank. So please take a moment to explain the economic model of the EV industry. I find it difficult to understand as there is a lot of government subsidizing and mandating involved, hardly free market stuff. And how does your business model fit into the above?
All right. Dan, are you wanting to weigh in, or shall I handle that question?
Sure. I can jump in for sure. Thank you very much, everyone. Pleasure to be on this call today. I'm very excited about what we're doing and where we're going. And Frank, outstanding job. Yeah, in terms of the government incentives, what we really like about this space is that, unlike hydrogen as an example, very cool technology, but not driven by policy, not driven by incentive money. These are 2 very important requirements when we're adopting new technologies. So, the short answer is yes, there's a lot of government money available. And when we talk about Canada, we talk about money at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. We're seeing this, I'm sure everybody's tuned into the Biden administration and what they're doing on the other side of the border. So, obviously we're very, we've structured the organization in a way that allows us to capitalize on those on the rebate money or incentive money. We have a number of individuals internally who just work on rebates and working with the province, specifically in our case, BC Hydro, and there can be other utilities that are involved too, to ease the process and at the same time tie us to our customers, we will submit on their behalf in terms of any incentives that are available for whatever project or deployment or proposed deployment they're working on. It's, as everybody can understand, I'm sure that making rebate applications for money is administratively challenging. So we've got people who specialize in this part of the space, who have experience in government, and there's a language associated with it. So we're very tuned into that, and it's a very big part of our business moving forward.
And Dan, if I may add from an economics perspective, I'll approach it from, if you will, the economy or at the macro level. For some 150 years, or the Industrial Revolution, the model has been flawed for that long, which is to say, what isn't in the equation when we particularly develop our costing models, which back into our establishing our sales pricing or our revenues, what has been left out of it this whole time is the cost of natural capital. What is the cost of pollution? What is the cost of a carbon dump? The incentives, which we believe are required simply to hasten the pace for the auto industry itself, that cannot be done on a graduated basis. That has to be done with a hyper adaptability and adoptability, hence the incentives. But if the equation is properly aligned and we just assess a cost or a fee or a tax, however you want to look at that from various disciplines, then the economic model will lend well to the current trajectory that the global markets are on. So really the incentives are just meant to kickstart it, so we don't have this lag or gap which will make it inefficient. But otherwise, it's simply just correcting the economic model. So the model we're embarking on, setting aside incentives for the acceleration of it, is the correct model. The previous model for about a century and a half has been flawed, and all we need to do is correct the assessments or the costs of the inputs and attribute it and factor it into the revenues. That model will correct that which ails us. Next question, Michael.
Sure. All right. So I'm going to try here to go in the order that the questions have been received. So there's like 3 or 4 questions asking about a presentation, a deck. Are you going to be able to provide a presentation on what you guys are covering today?
Yes, we had one attached to the registration, but for those that weren't able to access it or haven't, simply an email request, Michael, through you, and we'd be pleased to provide the deck.
Okay, you can download the actual presentation here on the Flyer Marketplace at flaia.org/marketplace341, and we will actually put a copy of that link in an email and a copy of today's presentation after today. But you can come on here and check out their marketplace listing when you have a chance. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing this and then get back into the questions. Is the Halted public company trading in Canada, CSX, TSX, or OTC?
Currently, it's on the TSXV. We have not finalized, but we look to perhaps move over to the NEO market, a tier 1 exchange that will enable us to cross-list onto NASDAQ. Our ultimate trajectory is to cross-list onto NASDAQ within about 5 quarters.
So next question, over the long term, do you anticipate primary revenue to come from SaaS or installations?
It's really the network model, which is quasi SaaS. There are also incrementals there. There's management and other types of things that are done through securitization, data gathering. One of the prime values over time, not unlike the Google model on a much grander scale, is the learnings from the customer's usage and their habituality. The utilities are essentially blind in that area. They have aggregated data. They do not have parsed data. Without that, they cannot deploy against the demand habits. So that data there we see as a revenue source beyond just the SaaS model.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just I want to jump in here for a second. I know we're talking about EV charging and the deployment of chargers, but you know, that's always going to be, it's where we started. It'll always be a part of what we do. It's as Frank mentioned, it's customer acquisition tool, and due to the, you know, the technical aspect of it, we're going to continue to provide that service. But really the play here is, and where we're very focused, what happens when 500,000 EVs plug in? You know, how do we manage that? How do we integrate with utilities? When we talk about, you know, intelligent load management or power sharing, it's a generalized term. It's what it really is you know, strategies, a number of different strategies that are put in place to manage electricity, and we're very focused on that part. You know, again, the Biden administration talking about, you know, fully electric, and how are we going to upgrade the infrastructure to the electrical infrastructure to be able to accommodate this, and we think software can do that. And you know, really what we built out here is an ecosystem. So there are other means of offsetting power through either stored energy, batteries, wind generated, hydro. There's lots of ways to tap into power. Solar, of course, we don't want to forget about that one. So the play here really is a focus on managing the power long term with while mitigating impact on the grid. And as Frank said, AI and machine learning are a big part of our software build out. Understanding how people charge, when they charge, the type of vehicles that are being charged is a part of that strategy in terms of understanding how power gets used and how we can manage it intelligently.
Essentially, in a phrase, it's really just making the chargers smart.
Okay, we have a question from Loretta. Is there a history of use per car owner involved? And then basically amount purchased, time of sale, cost. How does the customer know the efficacy of their EV?
There's a number of different ways, depending on the vehicle you're driving. That information could be on the vehicle, on board the vehicle. Our network provides that information when we onboard an EV owner in, you know, whichever application. Where public's different, that gets managed in a different way, but essentially they can access a portal and see their consumption data, you know, over a period of a day, week, month, quarter, year. All that information is available to them, and they can see, and that would include, you know, kilometers driven. All that stuff is available to them. So, and again, this is an important part of not only managing power at generation, but there needs to be consideration around the mentality around charging and how you know, EVs will charge moving forward. We're not talking about the gas station model. It's actually quite different. People use the gas station model as, you know, a way to think about how I'm going to charge an EV, but that you know, human interaction piece and behavioral pattern is going to be a big part of the load management piece as well. So that information is important.
Yep, and Dan, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit about how essentially we're mimicking the history and trajectory of the wireless telephony model. It's very similar.
Yeah, the SaaS, and I hate using the SaaS model, but I guess that's what we call it today. We're self-named as an integrator. There isn't an industry name for us that's been developed to date, but really it's about providing a service that's customized and meets that EV driver site, wherever we've deployed chargers. There's a specific set of requirements that, you know, are needed to manage that site. And you know, we take a charge point and a flow. It's proprietary, number one, which means there's not a lot of flexibility in what they can do. But number two, it's a canned approach to something that's very technical, so to speak. And I don't mean technical in a scary way. I just mean there's a lot that goes on when you think about how we consume power, how we charge our vehicles. So, our model is to really, provide that hardware, provide that software support, and provide information to the owner, to the site, allowing them to, better utilize their chargers and to be able to adopt new technologies and move with the evolution of the space. So that's really, it's what we're doing is solving problems that are associated with electric vehicle charging. We're not taking that canned approach. It's very specialized, and the nice thing about it is the software does all the work.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. That was me dropping my computer. All right. So Drew's asking, isn't level 2 25 to 35 miles per hour, i.e. 8 hour plus?
Good question. This is the number one question we get asked: how long does it take to charge a vehicle? And there's a number of things that you have to take into consideration, and that is the state of charge of the battery. So what, 80% being fully charged, 20% being completely depleted. Where is the vehicle state of charge when they plug in? And what we know is that in most cases it's above 50%. People typically it's not that, fueling up model where we let it get to, the fuel light comes on and we go fill up. That's not the model. So a level 2 typically will, let me back up. If you're destination charging, if you're traveling a long distance, then yeah, that gas station model is exactly how it works. You pull into fast charger, you want to get as much power as you can in as quick amount of time as you can, or short amount of time as you can. But a level 2 charger, typically we're talking about 35 to 40 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles. I apologize. For every hour of charging. So the average vehicle will charge for 2 to 3 hours maximum to get to that what we call topped up level. That's level 2. Now level 2 can output more power, but just for the sake of keeping this consistent and not getting too confusing about all the different levels, that's the average. When we talk about direct current fast chargers, they can, as an example, a level 2 will give about, or will transfer about 6.5 kilowatts of energy for 1 hour that it's plugged in. We have fast chargers that will transfer up to 480 kilowatts in an hour. So there's a whole, and dependent on the vehicle, as Frank mentioned earlier, the bus, that's 480 kilowatts, and they have massive batteries on board that charge in 15 minutes. So it just really depends on where you're plugging in. Temperature has something to do with it. A lot of people think, when we say vehicle charger, it's actually what we're installing is not actually a vehicle charger. It's a supply unit. It provides power to the charger that's on board the vehicle, and then that charger provides power to the battery. So depending on that onboard charger, that can also affect charging times. I think we're at a point right now where every onboard charger in newer EVs will allow just about as much voltage to go through to the battery as is available. So again, an average 35 to 40 for a level 2 kilometers for an hour of charging, and 150 to 200 for an hour of charging on a DCFC. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. So Loretta is asking two questions. So I'm going to read both of them to you, and then if you'd like me to reread them, let me know. Do you have or know of the rates of reduction of air pollution of EVs and how that relates to the growth of Electrum? And then she said, clarifying my last question, do you know or have studies that relate to the rate of reduction of pollution attributable to EVs, and how does this relate to the growth of demand for your company's products?
Both great questions. So, depending where you are and the level of adoption in that, market, those air pollution numbers can change. As part of our GHG initiative, our carbon neutral initiative, it's really, I know it sounds funny, but it's a multiplier that's based on the EV that allows us to include within the portal the actual GHG reduction in tons. So as an example, Fraser Health, they manage all the hospitals, healthcare facilities across BC. They're very tuned into this. They want to know, how much greenhouse gases are we taking out? Well, like, what are we getting rid of by the ton? So that becomes very important to them, and it can also affect or help them in terms of their LEED program, which is sustainable. So that's an important piece. And in terms of how it affects us, I mean, the adoption today is a testament to how people are thinking about not only this really cool technology, but that it's having a very positive impact on the environment. So, and carbon credits, this is the only area where in the carbon credit where we collect and resell carbon credits, that they allow all of the power that gets transferred from the charger to the vehicle to generate a credit, because there's no gray area there. Every kilowatt of electricity that goes from that supply unit to the car is offsetting liquid fuel, the consumption of liquid fuel. So, I think in the next 5 years, those air pollution numbers will really start to rationalize, but we do know, obviously, that, there is a significant reduction in GHG.
Frank, would you add anything?
Sorry, I missed that.
Would you like to add anything? Would you like to add?
No, not to that comment. That's Dan's area.
Okay. So moving on. Drew, how many installs are you doing a month? How many locations in your maintenance fleet? How many locations in New York and Ontario by 2023?
Today we have a combination of residential. So I think, Frank mentioned we have partnerships with Porsche, Tesla, and this is through their new car sales program. So essentially, every time somebody buys a new EV, they need a charger. We're working with them on that. We're also in the very early stages of negotiating with BMW Canada. We're very excited about that. We think it's going to be huge. That'll be in conjunction with Siemens Electric. But that's become a big part of what we do. We talk about that one as keeping the lights on. I know that Frank mentioned the project timelines that can get lengthy. Some of them are, a month or 2 months. Some can go on a year, depending on the size of the deployment. So, we work predominantly in that single dwelling, which is the Porsche, Tesla, BMW world, single dwelling residential. Then the MURBs, we do everything from, 10 stalls up to 1,500 stalls at a site. The municipal piece has been very big for us, Surrey specifically. They're a huge advocate for Electrum. We do a lot of work for these guys. In fact, we're just deploying another 2 fast chargers for them here in the municipality. It's a very cool site. And we do a lot of level 2 with those guys, as we do with Vancouver, North Van, New West, Burnaby. We're actually just in the process of trying to solve a power problem in New West, which is, I don't want to get too far into that, but there's a challenge there around utilizing power. And then the service side has really grown. Obviously, as more chargers get deployed, and then it's not even chargers that get deployed by us, but due to our expertise in the field and the customers that we've onboarded who have legacy equipment on site, that provides a revenue stream for us in terms of servicing and onboarding, or as they call them, rip and replaces, taking old technology out, putting new technology in. So, we can be anywhere from, we've 500 chargers in a month. Sometimes we can be 150 chargers in a month. It just really depends on, how the projects are lining up and the different, markets that we're deploying into.
And Dan, I'll add on to that. Thank you. Our first foray in Toronto started about a week ago in a pre-feasibility. Dan joined us out by the airport, our international airport out near Toronto, where a client is looking to do a charge and fly. I don't want to say too much more about it, other than it is at the pre-feasibility stage. And within about 6 months, we should have the applications in, and that'll be our first deployment in Toronto. But it's our primary motive there is because we have the Vancouver International Airport, and this was airport specific. I wouldn't call it an Ontario where Toronto is expansion. I'd call it an airport client silo expansion, and that happens to be in Toronto, and that's how we're moving along.
All right, so we have a ton of questions here, and we only have 10 minutes left. Are you guys able to stay on the call longer than the next 10 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, great. So to those of you that have to drop off at 2:00, feel free to do that. We're going to stay on and continue until we answer all the questions, or as many as we can.
I just want to jump in on that last comment just quickly. We are incorporated in the state of Washington. That market, we've done our research there. We're ready to go. It's a very aggressive space. They're doing or adopting a lot of the same policy that BC is, and they're a very carbon credit friendly state, which means we can collect carbon credits there. So again, that is on our radar moving forward for 2023.
Okay, great. This question is from somebody who's using my login. So it's not for me. Have you not considered venture capital money?
I'll take
Frank?
that, and thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I've been around. This is my 40th year in business. I've got quite a varied background, public, private, professional, and the like. My experiences with VCs, as a general comment, is that especially in this area, Dan, whom I've worked with for a couple of years now, and probably as many as 100 presentations, if not more. Dan is an expert and a pioneer. Many in the VC world are money driven, but are not necessarily industry conversant. So we have an aversion to that because we see the culture clash, if you will, of an emerging market of such great potential, and it being a relatively new market, but for people like Dan that have been in it for about 15 years, and that's considered a long time in this emerging market. So yes, we've considered it. No, it's not something that we are readily open to, unless, of course, and we've not seen it yet, the VC fund has what I would call a true expert, as opposed to one that has done a lot of reading but has not installed so much as a charger, assembled one, or perhaps weak in their understanding of electricity, because it's not just the charger, it's the complete networking system, and it's the power management. So it's a dynamic field, and it needs a lot of cross-discipline. We've not seen that yet.
Okay, thank you very much. What are the innovations in the EV charging field? What is the future of EV charging? This is from an anonymous attendee.
That's a great question. This is, I mean, I could talk about this one for a while, but just to keep it short, the last 2 years or the last year and a half, and as Frank mentioned, I've been in this for 15 years. The last year and a half has represented the most growth in terms of adoption, incentives, and infrastructure deployment than it has over the last 15. And I think we're going to be able to say that for the next 5 to 8 years. It's massive. I still think this is going to represent the largest technology boom of our time. And I know there would be a lot of people that would debate with me and say it's the cell phone, and I'm not going to disagree, because the cell phone's one thing, but when we talk about something that pulls as much power as a charger does, that changes the whole world. And it's all about how do we manage power right now. So innovation is key. And, I'd like to think that we're leading in that part of the space. We're thinking about this. My background, and I hadn't had a chance to really talk about too much, was in selling. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Schneider Electric, but they sell commercial and industrial and high voltage power. And I sold commercial power for a lot of years. And I understand electricity, I understand the grid, and I understand how the utilities look at power. So, we want to continue to innovate. That open source platform we've developed lets us do that. It lets us integrate with other open source technologies. And if we want to do something really radical and outside the box, we can do that. The innovations will be around the consumption of power, and the chargers, I think, will change immensely. We're going to move to a wireless charging technology. If I had a way to draw a picture for you, I don't know if anybody's familiar with induction charging. I think that's essentially where this will eventually go. But yes, it would be, this pedestal sitting at the side of the parking lot that you would pull up to, and the vehicle would communicate wirelessly with that pedestal, and you could, start your charging session, the billing, everything that goes on would happen through that pedestal wirelessly. You could have 5, 8, 10 cars sitting on that one pedestal charging. I think that's really where it's going to go, and I think that's probably 8, 10 years down the road. The most or newest technology that we'll see in the next 3 or 4 years, which we're working very hard on, is called plug and charge. Today, you need an app. You have to, access the charger through an app or through a portal or through tap and charge. You initiate a charging session, then you plug the vehicle in. There's typically an account associated with that. I think what's going to be really interesting about this is it'll open up other areas of revenue gathering, but essentially what you do is you just drive up, you take the plug out, you charge it into the car, the account's associated with the car. There's nothing to do in terms of initiating that charging session. And, I think that's going to become a big part of what we do. And then just the interaction with charging infrastructure will change immensely. It'll become more seamless, more digital, and we want to be ready for that.
Okay, great. So there's some hands that are up. One of them's from Andrea. I don't know if this is my friend Andrea Lou or not, but if it is, drop a Q&A in the Q&A box, and just let me know it's you, and I'll actually allow you to talk and ask the particular question you want to ask. So there's some people that are reaching out asking to be connected with you guys directly. I will definitely handle those connections. Chris Dowley is saying, how is the industry moving to standardization of charging stations? I own a Ford F-150 electric. Can I charge on a Tesla station?
That's a really good question. The answer is maybe. Actually, no, the answer is yes. We know that Elon Musk's plan initially was to take over the world and create a very user-specific charging experience. We now know that the production run of Teslas that started, I think, 3 months ago, will now include the J1772 and CCS1 configurations, which is what the rest of the world or North America uses to charge. Prior to this production run, Tesla had their own proprietary charger and inlet, as the rest of the world had, and that's BMW, Porsche, all the other guys. Any car manufactured in North America utilized the J1772 connector, and on the superchargers or fast chargers, it was CHAdeMO and CCS1. CHAdeMO's kind of gone by the wayside, so we're talking CCS1 and J1772. So the long answer to your question is yes, the new chargers that we're going to see from Tesla will allow you to charge your F-150.
Okay, great. Andrea, I am going to allow you to talk and ask the question that you want to ask. Andrea, you there?
She's muted, maybe.
Yeah, she is muted.
Okay, Andrea, if you can unmute yourself on the Zoom toolbar, I will get back to you and allow you to talk when you do so. So let's go back here to these questions. Are any of your sites on PlugShare app?
Yes, I believe, I don't have the list in front of me, but as a network provider, and of course we check with the site first, and it depends on how they want to utilize the site. But yes, those sites that where the site host has decided that they want to make these chargers visible to the public, we will upload them to the PlugShare platform.
Okay. Bob Moore has a question. Can we support power generation using natural gas? And then it says, let us, know what help you need with power needs. I'm not sure exactly what he's asking in that particular question. So
yeah, there's another question here too that I saw from Drew, and I think I'm looking at the right end regarding VDG.
Okay.
Yeah, so the answer is right now we're working with UBC, the University of British Columbia, on a microgrid project. And what this is it's a site that it's like a little city that they've chosen to run completely off grid. So no power from the utility. It's going to include vehicle to grid. It's going to include DCFC or bidirectional, solar, wind, hydrogen. I don't think propane was included in there, but I can check with them to see if that is something that they are working on. But I think, wherever we can get away from generating or utilizing coal to generate power is something that would be of interest for sure.
okay. All right. So I'm a real estate owner operator. We found that most buildings, particularly industrial ones, all in New York City, don't have enough power for EV charging. How do you expect EV charging to scale when this is the case?
That's interesting. The sites, and this really leads into where we provide EV or feasibility studies. We find most buildings or most facilities that we work in are only utilizing 20 to 30% of the total power available to them. So, I mean, in fairness to this question, we haven't done any EV load studies or feasibility studies in New York. But are there sites that potentially don't have enough power that are on a weird part of the grid that goes back, to the when time began? There is that possibility, but I don't think in 5 years we've been in a situation. There's been one situation where we had to pull in what we call a new service, which is more power, and that's it. One site in 5 years. So again, we haven't been actively working in New York, so it would be interesting to see some of these studies in terms of power and available power.
Okay. So Todd Tyndall is asking, please compare and contrast your business model to a company like ChargePoint.
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, we get asked this quite a bit. Right off the bat, number one, we're an open source platform. We use OCPP, which is a globally recognized open source platform. We're agnostic to chargers. We have, officially, the number's getting huge. I think we're up to 10, 12, 14 different manufacturers that we can, where we can use their chargers on our network. ChargePoint's model is it's a proprietary software. It's cool stuff. There's no doubt about it, but it only works with their charger, and their charger only works with their software. So as an example, if I, approached you and said, hey, I got this really cool cell phone, it costs a lot of money. You can only use it on my network. And if you don't like my network, you can't use your cell phone. We see this space moving to the cell phone model, where you have a really cool piece of hardware, and you can choose the network that best suits your requirements for charging. So that's number one. Having all of those chargers really allows us to be able to provide a very accurate solution for a site. I mean, there's look and feel, there's aesthetics, cost is a big one, especially when we deploy large scale. So I think those things are important. And then the model itself, the added services that we provide, the touch point with the customer can be 5 to 10 years, and there can be a number of different reoccurring revenue models that provide services that, it's great. Their services, we make money from it, but it also solves a lot of problems for that site in terms of, purchasing power in a higher rate class, serviceability, like our units are field serviceable. If something breaks on a ChargePoint charger, sometimes you have to replace the whole charger. If you're out of warranty, a $250 part is costing you $4,000 to replace, plus labor to install it. So, we're very focused on that part of that customer interaction piece. We have our people manage, service, and communicate with the customer. You're not following in to get a representative that you never talked to before. Typically, whatever market we're in, you're dealing with the same people all the time. And in terms of service, if you think about it this way, a subcontractor deploys chargers at a site for ChargePoint, and then a year down the road, there's a problem, and that subcontractor is not available. So another subcontractor comes in, and it takes him, he's charging you 2 or 3 hours of his time just to figure out what's going on in the building before he actually gets to the problem. We don't see consistency in the way systems get deployed, or the interaction between the site versus, the onboarding of chargers onto the network and setting up accounts. So, these are all things that are, I think, when we talk about electric vehicle charging, there needs to be that consistent interaction across all of the different aspects of that business. And when you talk about property management, developers, stratas, they don't want to be working with 4 or 5 different entities. They want to work with one person that gives them everything they need from start to handing the keys over to the site at the end.
There's a legislative question that I find interesting in here. So now I'm going a little bit out of order.
Okay.
So do they allow power companies to sell electricity at lower prices to EV suppliers? And if yes, what are limitations?
This is a rabbit hole. This is an interesting question. Depending on where you are, we know in California, they work a lot differently. They can sell by the kilowatt hour. Today in BC, we can't do that. There's still, we're in a really weird place right now where, Weights and Measurement Canada is trying to figure out how they're going to measure power. Typically the utility, to resell power, typically the utility you would have to apply to become a utility to resell that power. And once you've applied, you can't mark up that kilowatt hour. So it really doesn't make sense for from a cost perspective, because strata law has now allowed you to mark up the kilowatt hour to cover associated costs like service fees, installation, hardware, a little slush fund. So that when you're out of warranty or your services agreement is expired, that there's a little money there to fix things if something happens. So, there's a lot going on in the space in terms of how we're gonna do this. The utilities are being lobbied more on the DCFC side because they consume a lot more power and it costs more, can cost a lot more. but I haven't heard of a reduction in cost. What I think could happen is that the utilities will make an exception to the DCFC side of the business, where we consume all that power, in terms of what we call demand charges. So will there be peak on peak or off peak on peak, or will there be designated charging times where power can be cheaper to consume through a charger than if you did it, say, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the whole building's lit up? I think there's a lot of, I think that really needs to be there's some work to be done there in terms of rationalizing how power gets charged in terms of a fee. So it's going to be an interesting evolution.
Okay. Next
I
question.
hope that answered the question.
If it hasn't, you can put a follow-on question in the chat box, and if we can get to it, we will. What is the average replacement cycle of vehicles, and what percentage of replacement vehicles end up being EV?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure. So she's asking basically, what is the average replacement cycle of vehicles, and what percentage of replacement vehicles are end up being electric vehicles?
Statistically, I don't. I apologize. I don't have that statistic right in front of me. If that's something, I mean, we could dig that up. It's an interesting question. I know that the city of Vancouver shared some information with us, very high level, on a questionnaire that went out, and 87% of the respondents said their next vehicle, that they were considering an electric vehicle as their next vehicle purchase. So kind of gives you an idea of where the space is at and how people are thinking about EVs.
All right. So Gretchen wants to know, how big is the home market for your specific company?
Are we talking North America or globally, or?
I don't know. It doesn't specify. Gretchen, if you
Frank, what was the Biden administration's number?
Well, I think the question is specific to us. If I understood it correctly, what percentage of our sales or activities are, I'll call it single residential versus multi or other?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question?
That's what I thought I understood.
If you want, we can ask Gretchen to clarify her question.
Well, we'll just again answer both as best you can, and maybe someone else had that question anyways.
Yeah, so in terms of the market, I would say just in BC, we're a couple of 100 million for sure, and growing. In terms of our, the makeup of the different segments that we're in, multi-residential, I think for the unforeseeable future will represent the largest part of the revenue stream, because we're deploying so many chargers in one location. I mean, we're, like I said, our largest to date, that one of the largest we're working on right now is 1,500 chargers in one site. So, when you start to talk about a deployment of that size, there's a lot that goes on. So the next one would be probably fleet, which hasn't started up yet. I think that's going to represent the largest segment in the space. I mean, you guys talk about, school bus fleet in the US is the largest fleet on the planet, and they're electrifying now. So, throw everybody else in there, it gets pretty big. It's billions of dollars. And then, the public space, I think, is going to kind of peter off a little bit. That'll kind of wrap up here in the next 5 years. But when we talk about workplace, and we talk about single dwelling residential and destination charging, fast charging, I think those are all going to be significant in size. And again, when we talk fast chargers and deployment there, it's millions and millions of dollars. There's a lot that goes on around deploying chargers of that capacity.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. So who is your biggest competitors in Washington State and in Canada?
In Canada, I would say right now, probably ChargePoint and Flow. They are obviously, ChargePoint, they started when I started 15 years ago. So they've been around for a long time, and they spent a lot of money on marketing. So I would say, for sure ChargePoint. The other, Flow being the second one, they're based in Quebec. Again, model is identical to ChargePoint's model. And then, the electrical contractors, electric vehicle charging falls into the electrical world. So electrical contractors are, to some degree, are competitors, but we're finding as this gets more technical that they're becoming allies more than competitors, because they don't understand it. And it's not the electrical part they don't understand. It's what happens, what we say, after the plug. So how do you scale up? How do you manage power intelligently? How do you manage cost recovery, access, the touchless interaction? This, again, as I mentioned earlier, this isn't about the charger so much as it is about all the other stuff that happens on the other side of the plug. And that's where we're very specialized. So we don't have today, I think, a direct competitor to, in terms of what we are doing today.
Okay. All right. Next question. So Alex, who just asked that last question, it's just saying hello. Richard, next question with regards to the terms of your financing. What is the share price, and are you including any sweeteners like warrants, and if so, at what strike price?
Okay, I'll handle that. At public, we're doing a 4-to-1 split. So I'll do the pre-public math so that it ties into both the subscription agreement and term sheet. It is US $8 per share. There is a warrant sweetener, but its purpose wasn't so much a sweetener as it was a just in case mechanism. And by that, I mean about a year ago, when we did our first private placement, we received an unsolicited offer from a NASDAQ listed company. We were halfway through our private placement number 1, which happened rather quickly. It wasn't even 20 days. And we were oversubscribed. We had closed half, and then the offer came in. So we went into what is referred to as a dark period, went through a 75-day due diligence with this group, and ultimately, upon analysis of their share structure, we saw concern in their excess warrant position. So ultimately, that was our impasse. And we chose to walk from the deal. What we learned from that is, even while we're going through what we're doing, and as Dan pointed out, we've not seen anyone anywhere, Europe included, that do what we do. So it's not, it would not be extraordinary to get another offer to be acquired. So what we did is we put a warrant in there for double the share price in the event that would occur, so that those that would be newer investors would have the opportunity to benefit from a buyout. It's not the purpose of a traditional warrant, which is a longer term incentive to invest today. Those have an accelerated provision whereby once we hit either 10 million cumulative, the sooner of, or a tier 1 exchange, those warrants are accelerated and essentially expire. So the short answer would be not a traditional warrant. It's only a catch-all. In the event we wind up with another unsolicited offer, we want those that have invested to benefit from a short-term buyout offer. Dan and I are the largest shareholders combined with over half the company, and we're escrowing those shares for a 2-year period, starting with from when we close and list publicly. We are escrowed a full year, and then after that, releasing every quarter for a 2-year average out. So the idea is we are playing the long game, and the investors can watch us along the way and choose to do as they would with a good size. About a third of the shares will be in the share float in the public markets, and about 2/3 will be escrowed.
Okay. Richard, I hope that answers your question. And, I know that you're with a pretty significant family. So glad to see that you're on asking questions today. All right. So there's a bunch of people that are requesting to be connected with you guys directly. I'm forwarding those requests, and also asking the questions. So that will happen. If you do want to be connected, with Dan or Frank, just on the site, there's a connect button, contact button that will generate an email and make the connection. So next is
Michael, if I may, the last page of the deck also has the website, the info at email address, and a 1-800 number. So however, and feel free to pass Dan or my email along, email address that is.
Oh yeah, we'll do a follow-up with the recording of the video within 24 hours. It'll have the link to the marketplace listing, also a link to this video of today's recording. And through each of those places, you can download materials. With regards to term sheet, there's some people asking if they can get term sheets from you.
Yes, of course.
Okay, I know it's so it looks like there's some people who want to invest in this with you guys. Let's see here. So Drew's bringing up that there's a bunch of like broken charging stations. I'm not sure if you've seen that comment or not.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he says that this is an exceptional business model. And he wants to know if you guys are like focusing on some of the charge point customers because they're not renewing their existing contracts. Have you explored any of this?
Yeah.
Michael, Dan, if I may, just before you carry on, as you have much more detailed knowledge, the interesting thing is those are coming to us. But Dan, continue if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very focused on this. I think it's worth mentioning that to date we are not advertising in any capacity. So no Google pay-per-clicks, very limited on social media. This is just a bandwidth issue for us. I've always said we're the best kept secret. We want to get out in front of the world. Every time we come across a site that is considering ChargePoint, as an example, they're a very large property group. We had a meeting with them yesterday. They're across Canada. They were considering ChargePoint, and after our Zoom call with them yesterday, we're going to move forward at a site here in Vancouver, and they're asking us to install it in Manitoba, Ontario. So I think our model bodes very well. So we're definitely focused. I'd like to be a lot more focused on that piece, and we'll get there. But there's a huge opportunity, and through our R&D, we're working on a way to take legacy equipment. And as an example, because you say ChargePoint, there are sites that have deployed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of ChargePoint chargers, and the last thing they want to do is, or they're in a situation where they don't want to renew the contract. If they're not going to renew the network contract, the chargers don't work. So we're working on being able to get those chargers on our network and thereby saving them that what we call rip and replace cost, which could be significant. And that's high on our priority list. So bringing on legacy equipment, whether it's ChargePoint, Add Energy, whoever, we want to be able to integrate that infrastructure, put it on our site, and let that site manage it through our system.
Okay, great. Alexander has a question on top of the broken charger question. Speaking of broken chargers, what's the maintenance profile versus revenue for a charging station post initial installation?
Depending on where the chargers are located, if it's in a residential building, like a MURB or a tower, as much as we like to take the site's money, we don't. There's a really, really good chance that nothing's ever going to go wrong with those chargers because people look after them. They hang up the cable assemblies, they wipe them down. When we talk about public, within the first year, the service could exceed the cost of the charger by 2 or 3 times. People publicly, people don't really care about chargers. They beat them up pretty good. So having a service program in place for those sites is crucial. So yeah, I think, you know, and backing up to what I said before, the fleet is going to represent a huge part of the space. So is service. The more chargers, public chargers that get deployed, the more service requirement, the more service will be required. So yeah, I mean, you think about electrical contractors today who have service contracts in buildings, it's a great revenue stream.
Okay. Let's see here. So the best practices in EV charge and in the EV charging field, any examples on existing projects that you can go into?
Oh, sorry, I kind of broke up a little bit there. I didn't get that.
Sorry. So what are the best practices in the EV charging field and any examples on existing projects that you currently have?
Best practices are always, you know, we're dealing with the municipality, the inspection body. We want to make sure that, you know, in terms of available power in the existing electrical infrastructure, that is, you know, that we're right on the numbers there. We don't want, you know, breakers tripping down the road, causing problems for the site. You know, and the second one would be consuming power. We really don't, you know, the last thing we want to do is install a bunch of chargers and, you know, the Strata's coming back to us saying, hey, we're paying a lot of money for power. So, and, you know, lastly, it's going to sound funny. I mean, we all have something to sell. How we manage our customers ultimately dictates our success. And it's very specific. You know, I've been in the electrical space for 23 years now. And I understand, as you know, working with the manufacturers, understanding what the customers' needs are and how to manage them. It's super important. And this EV charging space is very, you know, that's gonna be a crucial part of how this happens. And you know, as examples of on existing projects, we haven't tripped a main breaker in one site. We haven't had any electrical issues. We've had issues with the chargers and of course the communication part. But, you know, things are going to happen. I think what's most important is how do we fix those things?
Okay. Drew's saying that there's a dead charging station in Northfield Mount Herman School, and he's saying, you know, to go after them. So anyway, Bob Moore he's asking to be connected to you directly, which I'm going to send over some of the information. And then the last question is, do your charging stations like connect with the electric vehicles computers and like share information on like drive data, for instance, like miles driven, the efficiencies, the you know, is there also a big data play here with your charging stations? And if you guys can answer this, great. If you don't feel comfortable answering it right now, it's also
I can answer that high level. Yeah, absolutely. The data is crucial. That's going to help us build better software. It's going to help the utilities to help the utilities better manage power. And again, as I talked about earlier, that behavioral aspect to or around EV charging is going to be important. And this information is going to be required in order to get, you know, that mind shift to electric vehicle charging. So Yes, we, today with a level 2 unit, that does not happen. The plug-in charge I talked about a little earlier in the presentation is what will really open the doors in terms of what we see for data, but also being very cognizant of, the Privacy Act, what information we can share, what information we can see. So it's, right now we like to see there's no names attached. There's nothing in terms of being able to identify. It's more an RFID access combination card or an app sequence that shows power consumed, where we can, type of vehicle. The rest is, time of day, length of charge. These are all the charging session. These are all things that we'll be able to gather.
All right. So guys, walk us through really quickly the investment opportunity again into Electrum, and just tell us like how you see it playing out from a time perspective. When are you guys closing the financing? What's the minimum investment? What's the process that you take people through? Walk us through the logistics for those that are interested in investing in Electrum.
Okay, I'll do that, and just lost you off my screen. There we go. Yes, what we would start off with is the term sheet, and all of the relevant data points are there. And we could supplement it with the subscription agreement at that point, or it can follow on. The subscription agreement we do in a number of ways. If the data are provided to us, we can prepare a DocuSign, or at least populate it and return it electronically. So that would be those would be the mechanics of it. Does that answer the question, or is there are there follow-on questions to that?
Yeah, you had minimum investment. I don't know what else was there.
Yes, the minimum investment is 100,000, as you'll see in the term sheet, and all of the specs provided. I think you'll see that in the teaser. I don't know if the minimum investment is in the actual teaser. I'm just looking here now. It is in the term sheet, though. Michael, did that answer the questions?
Yes, that answered the question. With regards to the term sheet, are we able to list the term sheet on the marketplace?
Well, I'm able to provide it to you. I don't know what your regulatory observations are, but I certainly can provide them, both the subscription agreement and term sheet, to you. And as your rules would pertain, I'd ask you to feel free to take it from there.
Okay, so after this call, we'll look into that, and if we can put up the term sheet and subscription booklets into the marketplace, we will do so, and we'll notify those of you on the call right now that it's been added up into the marketplace. So if you want to view it, it's FLAIA, FLAIA.org/marketplace/341. And again, we'll be coming back and sending you information, with today's presentation and updated materials. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time today and learning about EV charging solutions. It was an absolutely fantastic webcast. A ton of questions, very thought-provoking. There's a great opportunity to invest in this exceptional team. I hope those of you that tuned in today consider making an investment in Electrum. This is a major macro trend that's going to be playing out, and these guys are very, very well positioned to take advantage of that, and they have a good plan in place, to maximize your ROI. So with that said, I want to thank Dan. I want to thank Frank for being on the call today. And, I want to invite you guys to come back, here very soon and continue this conversation. So thank you, guys. That's all we have.
All right, Michael,
Thank
thank you, Flea, and your audience for being available and conversing with us today, and in particular, all of the great questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye now.